A fragile hope has emerged in the Gaza war after Hamas conditionally accepted parts of U.S. President Trump's peace plan. Hamas submitted its response to the mediators agreeing to some terms of Trump's plan while indicating that certain points still require negotiations. Trump, who has aggressively pushed both Hamas and Israel to accept his proposal, said this development brought a ceasefire in Gaza closer than ever. However, that hope remains clouded by the smoke of war. Israel stated that its troops were still operating in Gaza and warned residents not to return, despite appeals from the families of Israeli detainees and the U.S. president for an immediate halt to the fighting. So, is this a real final chance for peace in Gaza? Welcome to In Depth. Hamas' positive response to Trump's plan has brought hope, but there are still no guarantees that peace in Gaza is close, according to the New York Times. The group stated it was ready to release all Israeli detainees, but clarified that significant elements remain to be negotiated. The newspaper reported that Hamas embraced parts of the peace plan, while notably not addressing elements it previously rejected, such as the requirement to disarm. Crucially, Hamas also agreed to hand over the administration of the Gaza Strip to a Palestinian body of independent technocrats based on Palestinian national consensus and Arab and Islamic support. Despite these steps, many questions remain about the final terms needed to end the nearly two-year-old war, which has caused immense civilian suffering in Gaza. Following Hamas' positive response to the peace plan, President Trump publicly ordered Israel to stop bombing Gaza, declaring that Hamas is now ready for a lasting peace. In a move described by Axios as the first time Trump has attempted to force Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to halt the fighting, the U.S. president stated on Truth Social that Israeli attacks must cease because the current environment is far too dangerous to release the detainees. This unexpected public pressure puts Netanyahu in a difficult position as he struggles to refuse his primary international supporter. Mediators, Egypt and Qatar, have already welcomed Hamas' statement and announced immediate preparations for a new round for peace talks. Despite Trump's call to halt the fighting, Israel has continued its bombardment of Gaza. Le Monde reports that Israeli troops are still operating in Gaza and warned residents against returning to evacuated areas. According to the newspaper, Gaza's civil defense agency reported a very violent night, citing dozens of Israeli attacks on Gaza City and confirmed casualties at nearby hospitals. The families of Israeli detainees emphasized that an end to the war remains essential to prevent serious and irreversible harm to their relatives. Right, for more analysis, we are joined from Kentucky by Mr. Ahsan Al-Khatib, political science professor, and from Ramallah by Mr. Ahmed Fatouh, spokesperson for Fatah. Good afternoon to you both, and welcome to In Depth. Let me here start with Mr. Ahmed. Mr. Ahmed, with both Hamas and Israel accepting Trump's plan to begin further negotiations, how are the Palestinian people reacting to these developments? Do they believe now that peace in Gaza is getting closer?
Thank you for having me, and greetings to your guest and your audience. First, the president of Palestine, Mahmoud Abbas, have welcomed Trump plans, and now Hamas have already approved and accepted the Trump plans. Israel did declare an announcement that they would listen to Trump and stop the war. We still wait for them to apply these demands. We are hopeful that this is going to lead to a peaceful process, to a political process, a diplomatic process, in order to go for the permanent peace and a final peace. Now, Hamas has to go for stage one, which is to release the hostages, and in return, Israel would release the prisoners. So we expect now the technicalities and all these matters to be discussed with the mediators and with the relative partners of this process. From our part, the Palestinian president from the very beginning was very keen to stop this genocide, to stop this mass killing, mass murder of the Palestinian people, this ethnic cleansing campaign that aims to liquidate the Palestinian cause. It has nothing to do, it had nothing to do with prisoners, it was only against the Palestinian people. Now is the time that we have to take this opportunity to stop this war and to go further into political process within the framework that would justify the Palestinian cause and bring a final peace through applying the two-state solution, which should be, result into an independent Palestinian state on the 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital, because this is the only viable way in order for both people, both countries, to live in peace and coexistence. Otherwise, it will remain an occupation and unoccupied. So we have to be very careful about this, and we have to be very open-minded about this.
Right, Mr. Ahmed, we're speaking here about a cautious optimism, since there are lots and lots of items that needs to be illustrated and noted. Let me go here to Mr. Hassan. Trump welcomed Hamas' partial acceptance, saying they are ready for lasting peace, a statement that reportedly surprised Netanyahu. How did the Israeli Prime Minister react to these developments, particularly Trump's response?
Apparently, he's okay with it, and he seems to be agreeing that that Hamas has accepted, even though it's a conditional acceptance. Trump wants to end this for many reasons. The key reason is that the Israelis have failed in Gaza. They have failed to achieve any of their goals. They haven't been able to free the hostages by force. The estimation of the US government is that Hamas can fight in Gaza for years, guerrilla warfare, and that after bombing Qatar, Trump felt really angry and betrayed by Netanyahu, especially that Netanyahu, there were leaks from Israel that Trump knew and he was okay with it. And that was not the case. So Netanyahu had no choice but to go along with it. He doesn't want to seem to be crossing Trump, especially after all the support that he received from him, in addition to the isolation that Israel is experiencing.
Yes, but from your point of view, he's okay with that in theory or practically, because we're seeing the Israeli forces still bombing areas in Gaza, and they are still telling people not to get back to their places. We'll get back to you. Let me go here to Mr. Ahmed by saying some elements require further negotiations. Which parts of the Trump plan, besides disarmament, do you believe Hamas is most likely to press for substantial changes on?
I believe there's many points in the agreement that left many room for negotiations and further details. When we are talking about a final peace, we have many sensitive points that need to be discussed, which is not mentioned in the plan. There is the borders. There is the refugees' right of return, the Palestinian refugees' right of return. There is East Jerusalem, 1967 borders, and the governance. All of that is vital for any lasting peace. But it was a little bit more explanatory toward the hostages swap process. Within 72 hours to release all hostages, and in return, Israel would release some of the Palestinian hostages and the prisoners in Israeli jails. The talk is about 250 Palestinian prisoners of the high, period prisoners, those with life sentences. So that detail, of course, there's a lot of details. The technicalities now need to be discussed. Israel must stop its bombardment, must stop its mass killing, because for God's sake, it's just for ethical wise. It's the last moments before peace. At least stop killing children. So we hope that they will do that, and to also allow for Hamas to collect the prisoners and hostages and for swap. So this is the more technical details here. Now, when it comes to the two-state solution, and when it needs to be important here that we speak about the governance and who is the governing body. The governing body is the legitimate authority, which is the Palestinian Liberation Organization, the sole representative of the Palestinian people. Now, we do understand that there is a wish by the international community to oversee this process of transitioning from occupation into a full state. We accept that, and we also accept the presence of international forces in order to preserve peace and to eliminate any sort of escalation or aggression by the Israeli side. That should come by a mission by a UN Security Council, admission by the Palestinian Authority, the legitimate power. Now, it's important here, why I'm saying that, because this peace can have no legs without the Palestinian people. So this image or this misconception that it could happen by the international community alone, no. They need the Palestinian Authority. They need the Palestinian institutions on the ground to be the legs for that peaceful process on the framework that it should lead into independent state and contiguous Palestinian state from West Bank to Gaza, including East Jerusalem, under one system, one law. And we have also accepted the fact that this state could be demilitarized with only a police force, and to go for elections and to make a reform to the government. And this election has President Mahmoud Abbas has issued requests from any party to involve in these elections by recognizing the PLO and the international legitimacy and all the decisions related to the question of Palestine, and to work within the framework of the PLO with popular peaceful resistance, one law, one system, and one security force for all the Palestinian people. We refuse any kind of agendas outside the Palestinian national agenda or any intervention by any state or country or regime outside Palestine. We will work with the international community, and we are willing to remove all the obstacles in order to achieve peace. The Palestinian people have been unreasonably too reasonable for the past 3 decades. It's the time for Israel to calm down and to accept the worldwide pressure to go for peace.
So, in total, or you're speaking here about Palestinians should be ruled by Palestinians. Let me go here to Mr. Ihsan, and given that Israeli bombing is still ongoing despite Trump's order, what leverage do you think the US president truly have to compel the Israeli prime minister to immediate comply by or the immediate compliance from the Israeli military?
The Israelis are claiming that they have stopped military operations, except defensive operations and limited action. Basically, that's what they're claiming. But as usual, the Israelis would lie and would find a way to find a loophole to violate whatever they agree to do. Historically, they have done that as well. Now, with Trump, of course, I mean, Israel needs the U.S., the unlimited support of the U.S. military, economic, political, diplomatic, has enabled Israel to continue to fight in Gaza and to commit a genocide, despite all the pressure from practically all the world the rest of the world pressuring Israel, and still they continued because of the unlimited support of the US. Once they lose the US support, then they're in deep trouble. And they can't say no to Trump, especially that Netanyahu and Trump is very popular in Israel, and he's more popular than Netanyahu himself. Therefore, they had to say yes.
So you think the US will have the leverage on the Prime Minister and his government to comply?
Definitely. Sure. I mean, Trump is the reason that the Israelis have been able to commit the genocide, continue with it, and no one is able to stop them, is the support of the US. Without the support of the US, the Israelis will be in deep trouble. They know that. After the genocide, the only friend probably in the world is the United States. The Germans are supportive, but they're on the fence. They're unhappy with what the Israelis are doing in Gaza, and they actually indicated they want to rebuild and they want the people not to leave Gaza, and they're even more critical on these points than anything the US has said. The US said they're okay with removing them. The only country that supports Israel now, unlimited support, is the US, and it has all the leverage on the planet to pressure Netanyahu. Netanyahu knows that.
Right. Mr. Ahmed, how is the continued intensified Israeli military action in Gaza City, despite this urgent call for an immediate ceasefire, likely to affect further peace negotiations?
It's unexplainable. We can't understand why they continue bombardment and killing children, even in the last moments before peace. At least have the courtesy to say, stop the war. Let's go for this peaceful environment and just save some lives. But that is the Israeli occupation. It does not care. It does not have any kind of obligation, whether morally or legally, to stop its criminality. It looks at the Palestinian people as human beings. That is deeply entrenched in the Zionist mentality. And that is one of the points that need to be addressed further for the purpose of peace and coexistence. Now, Israel need to stop. There is no any reason for this bombardment other than killing. I can't explain it. If you have any other explanation, I'm happy to hear.
The explanation has to be told by the Israeli government, because despite Trump's call and of an immediate ceasefire, still Israel is not complying, and that is my question again reiterated to Mr. Ihsan. Now, despite this, there are still bombardments to Palestinian areas, particularly in Gaza, and also the plan involves a staged Israeli withdrawal and the disarmament of Hamas. Now, how does the US intend to guarantee the implementation of all these critical phases?
Yes, go back to the confrontation with Iran. The Israelis kept on heavy bombardment even after Trump said this has to end, and then Trump had to get angry, called Netanyahu and yell at him that this has to end, and they had to stop the bombing of Iran because that's enough. I remember during 1982 invasion of Lebanon, I used to live in Lebanon, and the Israelis, if it's close to a ceasefire, they start really heavy bombardment. And now, in Gaza, what they're doing, they say, oh, we have defensive operations, that we don't have offensive operations, and we have to do these for the safety of the soldiers. That's their claim. That's the problem, that the Americans are the only party that can pressure the Israelis, that can make things happen on the ground. But they have to be, the US has to be pushed to keep Israel in check and have it comply with what it agreed to. That's the issue with politicians, that Trump has to be to feel that he's under pressure to keep Israel in check, complying with what it agreed to. Now, with the Palestinians, now with the Hamas and this initiative from Trump, they know the Israelis, and they know that the Israelis would lie, and if they have any loophole, they will take advantage of it fully. That's why they responded with a conditional acceptance, saying that are many provisions. They need to be clarified and they need to have their input. I think the key issue here is that Arab and Muslim involvement in the process. So the Palestinians are not on their own. Uh, Trump has an interest in seeing this come to an end. He has the idea of the Abrahamic Accords, and he knows that his initiative for peace in the region has been hijacked basically by the Israeli government. Arab countries are cool as to relations with Israel. Saudi Arabia said there is no way we're going to have normalization with Israel, with the Gaza genocide continuing, and with no Palestinian state in the horizon. Therefore, there is pressure on Trump, but Netanyahu is known as conniving, and whatever he can get away with, he will try to. So the Americans have, and someone has to be on top of the Americans to make sure that they're keeping Israel in check. It's not an easy issue. And they take it from an example from contract law. When I used to practice law, I used to tell my clients, if you have the best contract in the universe with all the nice provisions, if you're dealing with people with bad faith, then you're going to be in trouble. It doesn't matter what you have in writing. So it's a struggle, but sometimes you have no choice but to deal with people that are known for bad faith. And the U.S. is a dishonest broker, as Professor Rashid Khalid, they called them. But by the end of the day, there is no choice. We're stuck with Israelis, and we're stuck with the American side as the only side that can really apply pressure on Israel.
I wonder if this good or bad faith exists in all this issue. Let me here go to Mr. Ahmed. And how does Trump's public pressure force Netanyahu to choose between maintaining the support of this or his crucial U.S. ally and satisfying the demands of his hard-line political coalition, which opposes any deal that stops short of total victory? And that's a very important point.
Well, there is a lot of pressure from the international community. We have the International Conference in New York, the two-state solution, this rising recognition of the state of Palestine, the Arab and Muslim pressure played a major role into pushing toward this deal. This war has to end. This genocide has to end. Enough is enough. Now, Trump
what I mean here, indeed, the international pressure is enormous, is unprecedented, and we have seen the international community for the very first time stands for peace and stop war in Palestine and all, in Gaza, and all that we've seen and followed those protests worldwide. But then there is the internal front and the far right coalition and their opposition to any kind of deal. So what do you think about that? How will he be able to make this balance?
You mean Netanyahu?
Yes, definitely.
The far right does not believe in any political process. The far right will cripple any path for a diplomatic and a normal way of dealing with the Palestinian people. They want expansion, they want colonialism, they want the war to continue endlessly. But there is also the pressure from the opposition, from the left, although the left were very disappointing and very weak and mostly very trying to become, giving easily their position up to the far right. But the families and the citizens in Israel are on a daily basis protesting against this war, protesting for the release of hostages and to accept the deal in order to release the hostages. There is also a growing pressure that people are getting tired of this war. It is making Israel look like a pariah state, because it is a pariah state now for doing a genocide, for doing crimes against the humanity. This entire global uproar against the Israeli oppression and starvation of the Palestinians in Gaza, the flotilla, the Samud flotilla, the mass protest. So there is a growing awareness within the Israeli community lately that's trying to put pressure more on Netanyahu. His popularity is dropping. So I believe, although he will lose probably the far right or the coalition, but maybe he could form other connections or other agreements with the left or the opposition. I'm not very optimistic about that. But either way, the election is very near, so he can't rely on that forever. I believe the growing international pressure, the growing American pressure, the growing internal pressure all lead to this moment. This is the only factor that is against peace, against stopping the genocide, is the far right. And the far right is crazy. They are fascist. So if he's going to listen to them, he's going to, throw Israel into a very big troubles that will not get out of it for decades to come.
Right. Mr. Hassan, the agreement has brought hope. But what signs would indicate the process is successfully moving from an exchange deal towards a sustainable end to the nearly 2-year war and the immense civilian suffering in Gaza?
I think I want to respond to what you asked earlier as to Netanyahu with his contingent of extreme right-wing religious Zionists. The key is that the opposition offered to give him the votes needed to stay in power, and that they have achieved what they wanted. But this proposal gives the extreme right what they want to a large extent. I mean, they have failed at ethnic cleansing of Gaza because for 2 years they've tried to kick the Palestinians out. They failed. The Americans tried to help them. They gave them time, but then they failed. So that was not possible. In addition, if they want the hostages, they get the hostages. If they want to disarm Hamas, that's on the table. Hamas doesn't rule Gaza, that's on the table. No Palestinian state, it looks like they got that. So they get something out of this proposal. It's not all making them unhappy. Now, as to seeing the process, there is Arab involvement, there's Muslim involvement in the process, and Trump mentioned these countries by name. And there is pressure, as your guest from Palestine mentioned, there's a pressure to get this process moving. And Trump has an interest in moving this process along because it's connected to his vision of the Middle East and the position of Saudi Arabia and other countries that are unhappy with what Israel is doing, and they see it as wasting time. I think the key issue here is that Hamas was not defeated in Gaza. Yes, Gaza has been largely demolished. Israel killed all these people, but the fact that they have thousands of fighters.
What do you call, sir, the killing of more than 66,000 people and more than 100 and so of injuries, the destruction of the whole infrastructure, the houses, schools, hospitals, the dysfunctioning of hospitals, people are starving. What do you call that?
Yeah. That's crimes against humanity, genocide, but it's not a military victory. The key is that did you achieve your goals? What is your goal in this war? The Israelis wanted to demolish Gaza, get the people out, and they settled it. And that did not happen. And the American military estimate from the beginning was that this is not going to be easy, that the Israelis will suffer heavy casualties. They spent billions of dollars in Gaza. They lost thousands of soldiers between injured and dead Israeli soldiers. You have hundreds of miles of tunnels in Gaza. The Palestinian resistance, Hamas and other fighters in Gaza, they can fight for years, guerrilla warfare. So they're not defeated. They're still in the fight. Therefore, just imposing on them terms is not possible.
With all respect, what were the goals that were achieved so far? What were the goals in the first place?
Goals for whom? For Israel?
For Hamas. What were the goals?
Hamas.
What was achieved?
Well, I mean, yeah, with the looking into the rhetoric and what they've been saying all these years from the beginning.
Yes.
Actually, what
the only thing is that
let me give you my point of view. Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas, offered the Israelis actually de facto peace, just like the Fatah and the PA have offered them. And then he said we can have peace. If you have Palestinian state, you release all the prisoners, and they stay off Al-Aqsa.
But there was
and
there
then
was
have
no
long-term
U.S. will
peace.
at then. Yes, very clear.
No, but after that, no, let me just tell you the context of this. And then they tried for 2 years to peacefully
Yes.
actually end the siege. And then the Israelis were shooting the
Mr.
Palestinians
Ahsen,
in the eye. And then
I really have to end it here because my time is out. But yes, clear what you are speaking about, and clear that peace choices were submitted several times, but there was no will and there was no international pressures as such. But clearly that.
Can I have some
they
chance
achieved
to
the goal
respond?
of making Israel
I have no time.
a state.
I really don't have any time.
The two-state solution now is on the table of the major powers, and that was not before October 7th.
Can I have 2 minutes to respond?
No, 2 minutes. I don't have 2 minutes. If you have
half a minute, I can take that. I think it's about time to look at the facts and stop our delusion. We are in a catastrophe. When we talk about 70,000 have been killed, full destruction of Gaza, if that is not a catastrophe, I don't know what it is. We have been very reasonable in our fight and our struggle for freedom, and Hamas need to become reasonable, not to gamble with the population, not to gamble with our people, not to gamble with our land, although that we are under occupation. But we preserved our heritage, we preserved our identity, and we continue to fight. Now it's time for the wise people to lead and Hamas to leave the scene.
My time is out. I have to end it here, seriously. So Mr. Ahsen Al-Khatib and Mr. Ahmed Fattouh, and yes, indeed, it's time for peace. We thank you so much for joining us here, and I guess that concludes today's episode of In Depth. Many thanks for joining us, and stay tuned for more updates on Q News.